She asked, "What do you want?" And I teased, "You." And she quietly took off her armor. HFY, the chamber of the galactic Concord, was built to intimidate. Its ceiling rose so high that the lights looked like distant stars, and the walls were carved with symbols from dozens of civilizations that had risen, fought, and survived long before humanity ever reached space. The air itself felt heavy, charged with history and silent judgment. Caleb Ward stood near the center of the chamber, hands clasped behind his back, posture straight but not rigid. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, simple in design, with no weapons visible. That alone made several alien observers uneasy. Humans were known as Deathworlders, survivors from a harsh planet, and many assumed they were always dangerous. A human standing calmly, unarmed, was somehow more unsettling than one in armor. Across from him stood Commander Vera of the Carcel. She was taller than Caleb by nearly a head, her frame powerful and balanced, built for battle. Her armor covered her from neck to heel, layered plates of dark alloy etched with faint, glowing lines. Each marking told a story of campaigns fought and victories earned. To the Carcel, armor was not just protection. It was identity, duty, and honor. Vera's helmet was off, revealing sharp features and eyes that reflected light like polished stone. Her gaze never left Caleb. She was famous across several systems, a commander who had never lost a campaign. That alone made this meeting dangerous. Humanity had crossed into disputed territory during a rescue operation months earlier, saving civilians from a collapsing station claimed by the Carcel. The act had been praised by some species and condemned by others. Now the future of human expansion in this region depended on what happened in this room. The council members watched in silence. Some whispered quietly among themselves, others studied data screens, but most simply waited. This was not a debate yet. This was a test of intent. Vera took one step forward, the sound of her armored foot echoing through the chamber. When she spoke, her voice was steady and controlled, carrying easily through the vast space. "Human envoy," she said, using the formal designation. "Your species has entered Carcel operational zones without permission. You interfered in matters that were not yours. Give me one reason why this should not be considered an act of aggression." Caleb did not answer immediately. He had learned through months of interspecies training that silence often mattered as much as words. He looked at her directly, not as a challenge, but as acknowledgement. "We entered because there were people dying," he said simply. "Species didn't matter. Borders didn't matter. The station was breaking apart. We had ships nearby. We helped." A low murmur spread through the chamber. Some species considered that explanation noble. Others considered it dangerously naive. Vera tilted her head slightly. "You risked war for strangers." "Yes," Caleb replied, "and we'd do it again." There was no pride in his voice, no attempt to impress. That honesty made several council members shift uncomfortably. Vera circled him slowly, her steps measured. Sensors in her armor quietly analyzed him, but she barely needed them. She had faced liars, conquerors, and diplomats trained to twist truth into knots. This human did not feel like any of those. "Humans are said to be impulsive," she said. "You joke in the face of danger. You act without considering consequence. Tell me, Caleb Ward, what do you want from this meeting?" The question was direct, almost sharp. In Carcel culture, such questions were not asked lightly. They were invitations to state intent without mask or maneuver. Caleb exhaled slowly. The tension in the room pressed against his shoulders. He had prepared a careful answer. He had rehearsed words about cooperation, shared patrol zones, and mutual aid agreements. But he was tired. Weeks of negotiations, of suspicion, of being treated as either a threat or a curiosity, had worn him down. Vera's bluntness cut through his rehearsed speeches, and without thinking, he let his guard slip. "What do I want?" he said, a faint, tired smile touching his lips. "You." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, sudden, and absolute. Every sound in the chamber seemed to vanish. Council members froze. Translators hesitated for a fraction of a second, then faithfully rendered his words across dozens of languages. The meaning did not soften in translation. If anything, it sharpened. Caleb realized his mistake the moment the words left his mouth. He opened his mouth to clarify, to laugh it off, to explain it was a joke, a poor attempt at easing tension. But he stopped when he saw Vera's reaction. She did not look angry, she did not look amused, she looked still. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in threat, but in focus. The glowing lines on her armor dimmed, then steadied. Around them, several carcel observers stiffened, hands moving subtly toward their weapons. Other species leaned forward, sensing something important had just occurred. Vera stepped closer, close enough that Caleb could see faint scars along her jawline, marks earned in battles older than some human colonies. "You choose your words carelessly, human," she said quietly. "Or you choose them with intent. Which is it?" Caleb swallowed. "Commander, answer," she interrupted. Her voice was not loud, but it carried authority that silenced the room again. Caleb straightened. There was no escaping this now. "It was a joke," he said honestly. "A bad one. I meant no disrespect." Vera studied him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She raised a hand, and the council's automated systems dimmed the chamber lights slightly. Privacy protocols engaged, not fully isolating them, but reducing outside interference. "This meeting is no longer a negotiation," Vera said. "It is a clarification." She reached to the side of her chest and pressed a control. There was a soft mechanical sound as the first locks on her armor disengaged. Caleb's eyes widened. "Commander, wait." The chest plate shifted, not falling away but loosening, separating slightly from the underlayer. Gasps rippled through the chamber. To many species present, the act might have seemed meaningless. To the carcel, it was unthinkable. Armor was removed only in 3 circumstances: before death, before judgment, or before surrender of command. Vera kept her gaze locked on Caleb. "Among my people," she said, "to ask for someone is to claim responsibility for them, protection, equality, burden. You do not ask for a commander unless you are prepared to stand where they stand." Caleb's heart pounded. He raised both hands slowly, palms open, a universal human gesture of pause. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't. I would never." Another lock disengaged. A shoulder plate shifted. The chamber was no longer silent. Whispers turned into shocked murmurs. Council members stood, some shouting in their native languages. Security systems hummed as threat assessments spiked. "Vera, stop," one carcel elder called out. "This is not the way." She ignored them. "Human," she said, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "If you did not intend this, you must say so clearly. Now." Caleb took a step forward, ignoring the sudden targeting alerts pinging against his neural implant. He was acutely aware that one wrong move could turn this moment into bloodshed. "I don't want you like that," he said firmly. "I don't want your surrender, your armor, or your command. What I want is mutual respect. I want you as an ally. As someone who stands with us, not beneath us." Vera froze. Her hand hovered over the final release. Slowly, she lowered it. "You speak of standing," she said. "Yet you joke when weight is placed upon you." Caleb nodded. "That's a human flaw. We joke when we're nervous. When things matter too much. It doesn't mean we don't take them seriously." He reached up and with deliberate care removed the small insignia pin from his uniform collar. It marked him as a Terran envoy, protected by interstellar law. He placed it on the floor between them. "In my culture," he said, "this means I speak as myself, not as a shielded representative. If my words caused harm, I take responsibility." The chamber went quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, less shocked, more attentive. Vera looked down at the pin, then back at Caleb. Something in her expression shifted, subtle but real. No one had ever answered a carcel commander's honor challenge by laying down authority instead of claiming it. She slowly resealed the loosened plates of her armor. The soft mechanical sounds echoed like a release of held breath. "This meeting will continue," she said, turning slightly toward the council. "But it will continue with understanding." She faced Caleb once more. "Your words were careless," she said. "But your response was not weak." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around them, the council members exchanged looks. The incident would be discussed for cycles. Stories would spread. A human who joked with a warrior queen, then stopped her from surrendering her armor by offering his own authority instead. The negotiation was no longer about territory. It was about what kind of species humanity truly was. And for the first time, many in the chamber were no longer sure they had underestimated them. The chamber did not return to normal after that moment. Even though Commander Vera had resealed her armor and the council lights slowly brightened again, something invisible had shifted. Conversations resumed, but more quietly. Data screens updated, but fewer eyes followed them. Many council members kept glancing between the human envoy and the carcel commander, replaying the scene in their minds. Caleb remained where he was, hands relaxed at his sides. His heart was still beating faster than usual, but his face stayed calm. Years of crisis response training on Earth had taught him one thing above all else: panic solved nothing. Around him, automated defense systems slowly downgraded their threat levels, though none fully disengaged. Trust, once shaken, took time to rebuild. Vera turned away from the council and faced Caleb again. Her posture was different now. Still strong, still commanding, but no longer rigid. She studied him as if he were a puzzle that refused to fit into any known pattern. "You surprised this chamber," she said. "Not with your words, but with what you did after." Caleb nodded. "I didn't plan it." "That much is obvious," she replied. A faint sound escaped her that might have been amusement, or might have been something else entirely. "Intent matters less than outcome in my culture, and the outcome of your action has consequences." Several council members leaned forward at that word. "Consequences," repeated an elder from the Thalrine Collective, their voice filtered through a translator. "Commander Vera, clarify your meaning. Is humanity now bound by carceral honor law?" A murmur followed. For some species, binding a rising power like humanity to an alien honor code would be a political victory. For others, it would be dangerous. Vera did not answer immediately. Instead, she walked a slow circle around Caleb again, this time with less tension. "He did not complete the claim," she said at last. "Nor did I accept it. No bond was formed." Relief rippled through part of the chamber. "But," she continued, "a challenge was issued and met. In carceral tradition, that cannot be ignored." Caleb frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," Vera said, stopping directly in front of him, "that I must test whether your words carry the same weight as your actions." The council erupted. "Absolutely not," snapped a representative from the Veli's dominion. "This is a diplomatic session, not a proving ground." "Humans are not carceral warriors," another added. "You cannot subject him to—" "I will not spill blood," Vera interrupted, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "Nor will I endanger this envoy. The test will be one of judgment, not combat." That calmed some, but not all. Caleb tilted his head slightly. "If this test helps us move forward," he said, "I'll face it." Several human observers watching through remote links stiffened. His security detail sent urgent encrypted messages to his implant, advising refusal. Caleb ignored them. Vera looked at him closely. "You agree without knowing what is required." "That's usually when it matters most," Caleb replied. For a moment, something like approval flashed in her eyes. The council eventually agreed, though reluctantly. A delay was declared. The chamber shifted configuration as partitions rose and the central floor lowered slightly, forming a smaller, enclosed space. This was not a combat arena, but a judgment circle, used rarely and only for matters of honor and intent. Caleb stood at the center. Vera took her place opposite him, armor fully sealed now, her presence steady and controlled. Around them, council members observed from elevated platforms. "The test is simple," Vera announced. "You will be presented with 3 scenarios, each reflects a choice that leaders face. There is no correct answer, only honest ones." Caleb nodded. The first scenario appeared as a holographic projection. A damaged convoy drifted in space, carrying civilians from multiple species. Nearby, a military vessel from a rival power waited, weapons charged. The rival demanded the convoy be handed over, claiming jurisdiction. If refused, they would fire, Vera spoke. "You command a single ship. You cannot win a direct fight. If you surrender the convoy, your crew survives. If you protect it, you likely die. What do you do?" The chamber went quiet again. Caleb studied the projection. He did not answer right away. "Are the civilians guilty of anything?" "No," Vera said. "They are simply in the wrong place." Caleb exhaled slowly. "Then I don't hand them over." A ripple of reaction followed. "You die," Vera said flatly. "Probably," Caleb agreed. "But maybe my stand buys time. Maybe it forces negotiation, or maybe it just shows that someone was willing to say no. Even if it changes nothing." "Especially then," Caleb replied, "because the next commander might remember it." The projection faded. The second scenario appeared. A planet rich in resources, inhabited by a pre-space civilization. Mining it would save billions in your own systems, but would eventually destroy the planet's ecosystem. The inhabitants would never know why their world failed. "You benefit," Vera said. "They perish slowly, unaware. Do you proceed?" Caleb did not hesitate this time. "No. Even if refusing means your people suffer shortages," she pressed. "Yes," he said. If survival requires us to become something we can't live with, then survival isn't worth much. Some council members shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with renewed interest. The final scenario appeared, a human colony under attack by pirates. Among the pirates are conscripts forced into service. A single strike could destroy the pirate ship, saving the colony but killing everyone aboard. "You have seconds," Vera said. "There is no alternative plan." Caleb closed his eyes briefly, then he spoke. "I take the shot." The chamber reacted sharply. Vera raised a hand for silence. "Explain." "I won't pretend it's clean," Caleb said quietly. "I won't pretend I sleep well after, but leadership means carrying the weight of impossible choices so others don't have to. I would mourn them. I would remember them, but I wouldn't let the colony die." The hologram vanished. Vera stood still for a long moment, then she stepped forward. "You failed none of the tests," she said. "I thought you said there were no correct answers," Caleb replied. "There are no easy ones," she corrected. "You did not seek glory, you did not seek avoidance, you accepted cost." She turned to the council. "This human understands burden." A low, thoughtful silence spread through the chamber. Several species began exchanging quiet messages. The narrative around humanity was changing again, but this time in a deeper way. Vera faced Caleb once more. "Your joke nearly created disaster," she said, "but your response created understanding. Among my people, that matters." "So, where does that leave us?" Caleb asked. She considered him. "It leaves us at the beginning of something dangerous," he smiled faintly. "Most worthwhile things are." For the first time, Vera allowed herself a small, visible smile, not as a commander, not as a warrior, but as someone who had glimpsed a different kind of strength. Around them, the council slowly resumed formal proceedings. Borders would still be debated. Treaties would still take time, but one truth had been established clearly in that chamber. Humanity was not reckless because it joked. Humanity joked because it carried weight and still chose to stand. The delay declared by the council stretched longer than anyone expected. What was meant to be a short recess turned into a full cycle of closed-door discussions, private transmissions, and quiet maneuvering. The judgment circle retracted, the chamber returning to its formal shape, but the mood remained unsettled. Too many assumptions had been challenged too quickly. Caleb was escorted to a waiting chamber reserved for envoys under review. It was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. The walls were smooth and pale, the lighting soft, designed to reduce stress. A single table stood at the center, along with a chair sized for humans. No guards were visible, though he knew better than to assume he was unobserved. He sat, folded his hands, and waited. Back on Earth, people would later argue about this moment. Some would call him reckless. Others would say he had been brave. Caleb himself felt neither. He felt tired and curious. The door opened without sound. Commander Vera entered alone. Her armor was still sealed, but its surface markings were dimmed, ceremonial rather than combat-ready. She stopped a few steps inside, studying him as if this were the first time they had truly met. "You are not confined," she said. "You are paused." "That sounds about right," Caleb replied. "Am I in trouble?" "Yes," Vera said calmly, "and no." She moved to the table but did not sit. Instead, she placed one gauntleted hand on its surface. "The council is divided," she continued. "Some believe your actions were a manipulation. Others believe they were evidence of a dangerous sincerity." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous? To established order," Vera said. "Your species disrupts expectations." He leaned back slightly. "We've been hearing that a lot." Vera's gaze sharpened, but there was no anger in it. "That is not a complaint." She reached to her collar and disengaged her helmet seals. With a soft hiss, the helmet separated and she lifted it away, placing it on the table between them. Caleb stiffened slightly. He remembered her earlier explanation. Armor removal among her people was not casual. "I am not surrendering," she said, anticipating his reaction. "Nor making a claim. This is conversation." "I appreciate the clarification," Caleb said carefully. Vera took a seat opposite him. Without the helmet, her expressions were easier to read. There was focus there, but also something else. Thoughtfulness. "Your answers during the test," she said, "were recorded. They are being analyzed, debated, and misinterpreted across multiple channels." "That sounds familiar too," Caleb said. She inclined her head slightly. "Tell me something, human. When you chose to remove your insignia earlier, were you afraid?" He considered the question. "Yes," he said honestly. "Not of you, of making things worse. And yet you did it." "Yes. Why?" Caleb looked down at the table for a moment. Because if we want to be taken seriously out here, we can't hide behind titles every time things get hard. Someone has to be willing to say, "This is on me." Vera was silent for several seconds. "In carceral history," she said slowly, "we tell stories of commanders who removed their armor before battle, not to show weakness but to show acceptance. They knew they might not return. They wished to be seen as they were." She looked directly at him. "Your gesture echoed that tradition, whether you knew it or not." Caleb smiled faintly. "I'm starting to think ignorance saved me." "Or guided you," Vera replied. A soft chime echoed through the room. Vera's armor interfaces flickered briefly, displaying incoming data. Her expression tightened. "The council has reached a preliminary decision," she said. "They will not punish you, but they will not trust you either." "That sounds familiar too," Caleb said dryly. "They wish to test humanity further," Vera continued. "Not with words. With consequence." Caleb straightened. "What kind of consequence?" "There is a system near the contested border," she said. "Unstable, pirate activity, refugee traffic, failing infrastructure. The council has avoided direct involvement. Too many risks, too many jurisdictions." "And you want humans to go there," Caleb said. "They want to see what you do when no one is watching," Vera corrected. "When no council chamber exists, when jokes cannot soften outcomes." Caleb nodded slowly. "And if we refuse?" "Then the narrative becomes clear," she said. "Humans speak well but retreat when burden grows heavy. And if we accept, then you will step into a situation where failure will be very visible," Vera said, "and success will make many uncomfortable." Caleb did not answer right away. He thought of Earth. Of colonies still struggling, of ships already stretched thin. "We'll accept," he said. Vera searched his face. "You did not ask for details." "I don't need them yet," he replied. "I need to know one thing." "What is that?" "Are you going with us?" he asked. The question surprised her. Her eyes widened slightly. "I am carceral," she said. "My presence will complicate matters." "So will ours," Caleb said. "That system doesn't need another observer. It needs someone who understands both sides." She was silent for a long moment. "Very well," she said at last. "I will accompany your task force as an advisor, nothing more." Caleb smiled. "I'll take it." Preparations moved quickly after that. The council announced the mission publicly, framing it as a joint stabilization effort. Privately, every major power watched closely. Human ships began assembling at the edge of carceral space, their crews briefed on rules of engagement that emphasized restraint, aid, and cooperation. Caleb boarded the human cruiser Horizons Wake 2 cycles later. It was not the largest ship, but it was reliable, crewed by veterans of disaster relief and evacuation operations. As he stepped onto the bridge, familiar faces greeted him with nods and quiet smiles. Vera arrived shortly after, escorted by a small honor detail that remained aboard her own vessel. She chose to meet the human crew without armor markings displayed, her presence alone commanding respect. The journey to the unstable system took several days. During that time, Caleb and Vera spoke often, not formally, not always easily. They discussed command structures, cultural misunderstandings, and the limits of authority. "You delegate differently," Vera observed during one discussion. "Your officers question you openly." "They're supposed to," Caleb said. "It's how we catch mistakes early. In carceral fleets, that would be seen as disrespect. And yet your best commanders adapt in the field," Caleb countered. "They improvise," she considered that. "Perhaps our differences are smaller than they appear." When they arrived, the situation was worse than expected. The system's primary station was damaged, barely holding atmosphere. Refugee ships drifted without power. Pirate signals flickered in and out, probing defenses. Caleb stood on the bridge watching the chaos unfold on the main display. "This is where people usually start arguing about jurisdiction," he said quietly. Vera stepped beside him. "Yes," he turned to the crew. "Begin rescue operations. Broadcast open aid channels. No weapons unless absolutely necessary." "Aye," came the response. Vera watched as human ships moved immediately, tractor beams stabilizing drifting vessels, drones deploying repair units, med teams preparing for boarding actions. "You act first," she said, "and justify later." "We justify by acting," Caleb replied. As the first refugees were brought aboard, panic gave way to relief. Pirate vessels lingered at the edge of sensor range, uncertain. This was not the reaction they expected. Somewhere far away, council observers recorded every move. And in that broken system, amid fear and uncertainty, a quiet realization began to form. Humanity was not here to prove a point. They were here to carry weight. And they did not ask who was watching. The first hours of the operation passed in controlled chaos. Human ships moved with steady purpose through the debris-filled system, their engines flaring softly as they adjusted position again and again. Rescue drones swarmed like careful insects, cutting through twisted metal, sealing hull breaches, and guiding drifting pods towards safety. Medical teams worked without pause, treating injuries from dozens of species, often without knowing their names or languages. Caleb moved from station to station aboard the Horizon's wake, checking reports, offering quiet words where needed. He did not shout orders. He did not demand speed. He trusted his people to do their jobs, and that trust showed in how smoothly they worked. Vera watched everything. She stood on the bridge most of the time, arms folded behind her back, eyes fixed on the shifting displays. In carcel operations, such a situation would have been secured first, enemies identified and neutralized before aid began. Here, humans had reversed the order. Help came first. Security followed quietly, almost invisibly. "It is inefficient," Vera said at last. Caleb glanced at her. "From a tactical view?" "Yes," she replied. "You expose yourself." He nodded. "We know. And yet you continue." "Because stopping would cost lives," he said simply. Before she could respond, a warning tone echoed across the bridge. One of the forward sensor officers looked up sharply. "Multiple pirate vessels powering up," the officer reported. "They're moving in fast." No response to hails. Caleb's expression hardened. "Shields to full, defensive pattern only." Vera turned toward him. "They will test you." "They already are," Caleb said. The pirate ships emerged from behind the outer moon, scarred and mismatched, weapons glowing with unstable energy. They formed a loose arc, clearly expecting the humans to pull back, to defend themselves instead of the refugees. Instead, the human ships tightened formation around the damaged station and evacuation lanes. "Broadcast message," Caleb ordered. "All channels." A calm voice filled the system, translated automatically into dozens of languages. "This is the Terran Relief Fleet. We are conducting rescue operations. Withdraw now. No one needs to be hurt." The pirates responded with silence and then fire. Energy bolts struck the outer shields of the nearest human frigate. The shields flared but held. The refugees watching from viewports cried out in fear. Caleb did not raise his voice. "Point defense only. Disable weapons if you can. Do not target life support." Vera stared at him. "You limit yourselves while under attack." "Yes," he said, "because we're not here to win, we're here to protect." The battle that followed was unlike any Vera had witnessed. Human ships did not pursue. They did not press advantage. They moved like guardians, interposing themselves, using precision strikes to knock weapons offline, targeting engines instead of hulls. Several pirate vessels attempted to break through toward the refugee ships. Each time, a human cruiser shifted smoothly into their path, absorbing fire, forcing the pirates to turn away or risk destruction. One pirate ship fired recklessly, its weapon overloading. The resulting explosion tore through its own hull, debris scattered across space. "Escape pods detected," a sensor officer called out. Caleb responded instantly. "Mark them, we'll pick them up after this is over." Vera turned sharply. "They attacked you." "They're still people," Caleb said. The pirate leader finally broke silence, broadcasting a furious message filled with threats and disbelief. They had expected fear. They had expected negotiation or retreat. What they faced instead was refusal to abandon the weak. Gradually, the pirates pulled back. One by one, their ships limped away, weapons damaged, confidence shaken. They had gained nothing and lost the initiative. The system fell quiet again, broken only by the steady hum of rescue operations. On the bridge, a low cheer rippled through the crew. Caleb allowed himself a brief nod of acknowledgement, then turned back to work. Vera stood very still. "That choice," she said quietly, "will be discussed for generations among my people." Caleb looked at her. "Because we fought?" "No," she replied. "Because you restrained yourselves." As the final refugees were evacuated from the failing station, an alarm sounded again, different this time, structural failure. The station's core was collapsing faster than predicted. "We have minutes," an engineer reported. "If it goes, the debris field will wipe out everything nearby." Caleb looked at the display. Several human ships were still inside the danger zone, towing disabled vessels. "Pull them out," he ordered. Sir, the officer hesitated, the tugs won't clear in time unless we cut them loose, Caleb finished. Silence fell on the bridge. That leaves hundreds behind, the officer said. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second, then he opened them. No, he said, we stay. Vera's head snapped toward him. Your ships will be destroyed. Maybe, he replied, but if we leave now, they definitely die. He turned to the crew. All hands, emergency reinforcement protocols. We hold until the last ship clears. No one argued. Human engineers pushed systems beyond safe limits. Hulls groaned, shields flickered, heat warnings filled the bridge. One by one, the evacuation ships cleared the zone. The station's core ruptured. A blinding wave of energy and debris tore outward. Human ships braced, shields flaring to maximum. One frigate lost engines, drifting helplessly. Tractor beam on the frigate, Caleb ordered. We're already overloaded. Do it anyway. The Horizon's wake surged forward, systems screaming in protest as it latched onto the damaged ship and dragged it clear. The shockwave passed moments later, battering the fleet but missing the evacuation corridor by a narrow margin. When it was over, several human ships bore heavy damage. None were lost. The system was silent again. Vera slowly exhaled, a sound almost like disbelief. You risked everything, she said. For strangers, for enemies, for those who offered you nothing. Caleb slumped slightly into his chair. That's the job. In the days that followed, aid stations were established. Supplies were distributed. Pirates who had been rescued from escape pods were treated alongside civilians, their weapons secured but their wounds tended. Council observers could no longer deny what they were seeing. Reports flooded in. Footage spread across the network. Commentary shifted from suspicion to confusion, then to something like respect. A formal summons arrived from the council. Caleb and Vera returned together. The chamber felt different this time. Less cold, less hostile. When Vera entered beside the human envoy, armor bearing new marks of joint command, the room fell silent. The accusations came quickly. Humans had overstepped. Humans had endangered stability. Humans had interfered. Caleb listened, then spoke plainly. He did not defend every choice, he explained them. We didn't go there to make a statement, he said. We went because no one else would. The council turned to Vera. Commander, an elder asked, do you stand by this human? She stepped forward. I do, she said without hesitation. They acted with restraint, courage, and responsibility. They did not seek dominance. They accepted burden. A pause followed, then something unprecedented happened. The council voted not just to recognize humanity's actions, but to adopt their approach as a model for future joint operations. The decision stunned the chamber. As the session ended, Vera turned to Caleb. You have changed how the galaxy looks at your species, she said. He shook his head. We just did what we thought was right. She regarded him for a long moment. Among my people, she said slowly, armor is reforged after great trials, not to erase damage, but to remember it. Caleb smiled faintly. Sounds healthy, she inclined her head. You have one part left to play in this story, human? He raised an eyebrow. I was hoping for a break. Her eyes glinted with something close to humor. The galaxy, she said, rarely allows that. The chamber emptied slowly after the vote, voices low, movements thoughtful. What had happened could not be undone, and no one present truly understood all the consequences yet. For the first time in a long while, the Galactic Council was not arguing about territory or power. They were thinking about responsibility. Caleb walked beside Vera through the wide exit corridor. Neither spoke at first. The quiet felt earned. You are tired, Vera said at last. Caleb smiled faintly. I think I aged a few years in that system. That is acceptable, she replied. You earned them. Outside the chamber, media drones hovered at a respectful distance. They did not rush forward. The presence of the Carcel commander beside the human envoy discouraged careless behavior. Images of them together spread across the network almost instantly. Human and alien. Side by side, they parted at the transit junction. Vera paused before turning away. When my armor is reforged, she said, it will carry a mark from this mission. Caleb looked at her. What kind of mark? One that signifies shared burden, she replied. It will be unfamiliar. I'll take that as an honor, he said. She inclined her head and departed. In the days that followed, the galaxy reacted. Some praised humanity openly, others accused them of manipulation through compassion. A few powers grew uneasy, realizing that influence did not always come from fleets or threats. It could come from choice. Human ships returned home battered but intact. Crews were welcomed as heroes, though most of them resisted the word. They had not fought a war. They had held a line. Caleb returned to Earth briefly, summoned to speak before the Terran Assembly. He told the story plainly, without embellishment. He spoke of mistakes, fear, and weight. "We don't get to choose easy problems anymore," he said. "Not if we want to stand out there with others. Strength isn't what we can take, it's what we're willing to carry." The message spread far beyond Earth. Weeks later, a formal invitation arrived. The Carcel High Forge requested Caleb Ward's presence. He arrived at their homeworld under heavy protocol, escorted through vast halls carved from stone and metal. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of heated alloy. The forge was sacred ground, where armor and identity were shaped together. Vera waited at the center. She stood without helmet, armor removed entirely, wearing a simple ceremonial garment. Around her, forge masters worked in silence, shaping a new suit on an elevated platform. It gleamed softly, its surface bearing patterns unlike traditional Carcel design. Caleb stopped at the edge of the platform. "I wasn't sure I should be here." "You should," Vera said. "You are part of this." She gestured to the armor. "In our culture," she continued, "armor records truth. Every mark tells a story. This one tells of restraint. Of standing between danger and the helpless, of refusing easy victory." She touched a newly etched symbol. It was unfamiliar, a blend of Carcel geometry and something distinctly human. "This symbol," she said, "means the one who stays." Caleb swallowed. "I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing," she replied. "That is enough." As the final plates cooled and were lifted into place, the forge masters stepped back. Vera donned the armor slowly, deliberately. When the helmet sealed, the markings flared softly, then settled into a steady glow. She turned to face him. "From this day," she said, her voice resonant within the helm, "Carcel forces will answer humanitarian calls alongside human fleets when possible." Caleb's eyes widened. That's a big step." "Yes," she said, "and it will not be easy, but it is right." Word of the declaration spread quickly. Other species took notice. Some followed, some resisted, but the pattern had begun. Months passed. Joint operations became more common, not perfect. Not smooth, but different. Where once fleets arrived with weapons ready, now some arrived with aid already prepared. Caleb remained an envoy, but his role changed. He was no longer just negotiating borders. He was shaping expectations. Then came the crisis. A distant system went dark. Communications failed. Long-range scans showed massive energy disturbances. No one claimed responsibility. No one volunteered to investigate. The council hesitated. Caleb stood once more in the chamber where it had all begun. He felt the weight again, familiar now. "We'll go," he said. This time he was not alone. Vera stepped forward beside him, then others did too. Representatives from species that had once doubted humanity now offered ships, resources, support. The mission was dangerous. It would cost lives, everyone knew that. As fleets assembled, Caleb stood on the observation deck of a human carrier watching stars slide past. Vera joined him. "You understand now," she said, "why my people fear removing armor." "Yes," he replied. "Because once you do, you can't pretend anymore." She inclined her head. "Exactly." The mission was hard, harder than the last. They found survivors, they found loss. They found choices with no clean answers. And again, humanity stayed, not because they were the strongest. Not because they were the bravest, but because they refused to walk away. When the fleets returned, fewer ships than had departed, the galaxy took notice again. Not of victory, of endurance. Years later, historians would argue about when humanity truly became part of the wider galaxy. Some would say it was first contact. Others would say it was a war or a treaty. But those who were there would remember a different moment. A tired human envoy, standing unarmed before a warrior commander, speaking careless words, and then choosing to carry the weight of them. They would remember that humanity did not rise by taking armor from others. They rose by knowing when to set their own aside. And in that choice, the galaxy found something rare. A species willing to stand, not above, not below, but beside.